Doing whatever it takes for our students, this is Education Forum, the podcast. I'm Allison Sillis, the Provincial Community Organizer for OSSTF FASO, and I'm here with our president, Martha Haradaway, to talk about a variety of issues that you, the members, are feeling right now. Thanks so much for being here with me today, Martha.
Thanks, Allison, for having me again. It's my pleasure.
That's great. So let's get right into it. Why is de-streaming such an important topic for our members and educators right now?
Yeah. Well, maybe we should start with what is de-streaming for some of the listeners. De-streaming was introduced in 2020 by this current provincial government. And so the concept of it is that when students are in grade 8, they have to choose which pathway they are going to enter when they enter into high school, into grade 9. And before 2020, there were two streams. There was an applied stream, which traditionally led students on a pathway towards college, a college diploma or skilled trades. And then there was the academic pathway. And that pathway led students toward more university-bound courses. And so the government said, you know what, it's grade 8, grade 9 is too early for students to pick which pathway they need to go into. Students are too young. And research has really shown that when streaming happens that early as well, Black, Indigenous, and racialized students were disproportionately being streamed into the applied level courses. And so the government introduced de-streaming as, I will say, an opportunity to address that equity, disproportionate streaming for students. And they combined both the applied and academic courses into one de-streamed course. So in grade 9, it had started with the grade 9 math course. That was the first course to be de-streamed. And then, as we move along into the years, all of the grade 9 courses are now de-streamed, and some of the courses in grade 10 are de-streamed. So the original intention of de-streaming really does matter because it was about equity and it was about opportunity. Because like I said, for a long time, Black, Indigenous, racialized students, as well as students with disabilities and students from low-income families, were being disproportionately streamed into the applied classes. But when the government introduced this, they didn't do the things that they needed to do to make it successful. The curriculum for that grade 9 math class was introduced in July of 2020, and teachers were expected to implement that in September with no professional development, no additional supports in terms of educational assistance, and also, what happened is that the class sizes weren't reduced either. And it's very difficult to talk about because our members do care very deeply. They care about students, and members want to support equity. But they also need the truth to be heard, is that equity isn't a slogan, just a slogan. I'll say equity is a resource. And if we pretend this works without the staffing, without the training, and without the time, we are really setting up students to struggle. And we set up our members as well to burn out. And so members are saying to me, and what I'm hearing, they don't want this to be framed as if they're against equity. What they're saying is we need the resources and the supports to make equity real in our classrooms.
That's great. Thanks, Martha. So OSSTF FASO backs de-streaming if funded properly, but we are seeing so many more instances of class complexity and various students' needs in our classrooms with no guaranteed extra support or training for our staff. And so that really means that our students aren't getting the resources that de-streaming promised them.
That's exactly it. When de-streaming was first introduced, I would say that there was a lot of hope. There was a lot of hope that this was going to, have a meaningful impact for those students who were disproportionately streamed into applied classes. And, it also meant for our members, like, what is this going to look like in September when I have to teach a new curriculum that I have had no professional development on? Because when you're teaching a de-streamed class, there's the classroom dynamics definitely change. Assessment is different. You have to differentiate your instruction to be able to meet the needs of each individual learner. You have to also look at, safety planning and communication with families. Like, everything changed overnight. And so it left our members really trying to, build a system that they had no supports when it was introduced. So, our members, what we heard right away is that they were feeling the impacts of not having that additional support, not having those lower class sizes to be able to meet individual needs. And that has just, I will say, become more complex since 2020, since it's been introduced, because the government has not put the resources or the funding or the supports to be able to make this successful. I will say, there have been teachers that are doing their best to make it successful, but teachers and students should not have to carry the burden of an underfunded system just to make it work. It's also government's responsibility to step in, to provide the supports, to provide the resources that they need. And, I would say for the most part, parents are feeling the impacts of this too. Families want their kids to be supported. Teachers want their students to be supported. We want the best for kids. We just need a government partner that's going to come to the table and actually put the investments in to support our students so every child can be successful moving forward.
Absolutely. So when we're thinking about what's best for our members and our students, can we talk a little bit about what some of the research shows on de-streaming?
Absolutely. I mean, the research is very clear that when students are given access to high expectations and appropriate support, outcomes improve. Mm-hmm. And so that really is the, I'll say, core of why de-streaming works when it is properly resourced, when teachers have appropriate planning time, and when teachers have access and students have access to additional supports. I want to talk about a research study that People for Education has conducted. I think it was back in 2023. And I want to draw listeners' attention to some of the statistics that were shown in this research report, and I'll just read them here. So the findings from the People of Education study on 1,044 principals from all 72 publicly funded school boards across Ontario, People for Education described that as alarming. And so the report found, I'll just talk about the 5 statistics here. Only a mere 34% of secondary schools reported having lower class sizes to support de-streaming, from 40% in 2021 and 2022. So schools, as the government cuts back additional funding, they're not able to provide those lower class sizes. So this statistic shows that, in fact, 34% of secondary schools have lower class sizes, and that's just not sufficient. 96% of secondary school principals reported that they need an increase in educational assistance and special education supports. Yep. 96% of secondary schools in the province of Ontario say that they don't have enough educational assistance and special education supports. And that is something, we're consistently hearing across the board, not only in de-streaming, but supports for students who need that additional support. 93% of principals from secondary schools indicated that they needed support in order to provide teacher training on de-streaming. And like I said, back in 2020, the curriculum was rolled out in July, in the middle of summer. no additional teaching supports for teachers, and they were just expected to walk into the classroom and just make it work. 85% of secondary school principals said that they needed support to reduce class sizes. And, this is something that we're going to be demanding from the government in this next round of bargaining. We cannot continue with the status quo because it's just not working. And like I said earlier, teachers and education workers and students, they should not have to carry the burden of an underfunded system. And it's time for the government to step up and restore the $6.3 billion that has been removed from education and put it into the frontline classroom supports, just like the minister says that he wants to do. And then the last one says that secondary schools in high-income neighborhoods were much more likely to have de-streaming supports and reduced class sizes compared to schools in low-income neighborhoods. And again, that was why de-streaming was introduced, because low-income families or low-income students were being disproportionately streamed into applied classes. But yet again, here they are sitting at academic class size levels, sometimes 28, 29 to 1, and it's just not working for students. So it's time for this government to really step up to the plate. If they're serious about putting investments in into frontline classrooms, to frontline teachers, then they need to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if the goal in bargaining is to get the best resources for our students, what is the union's position on de-streaming as we're going into bargaining?
Our position is clear. We support the goal of de-streaming, but we're demanding better working conditions for our members and better learning conditions for our students. When I talk to everyone, I try to ground it in our values first. We all want our students to be successful. We all want the best opportunities for our children, for doors to open for them. But then we have to name the truth. And the truth is, it's that schools right now are not getting the resources that they need to be able to make this successful. And, why it's connected to bargaining is because bargaining is where we fight for the conditions that make these programs successful. I do say at times it's unfortunate that we have to wait until we get to the bargaining table, because the government can do the right thing right now and put those resources in. And they, in fact, should have put them in when they implemented this program in the first place. So the union's position is very clear, is that we cannot continue to, again, carry the burden of, an underfunded public education system. We want public education to work. We want our students to have the best opportunity at success. And if the government isn't going to step in and do what's right, we're going to demand it at the bargaining table.
So what would you say to educators and our members who are supportive of de-streaming but are really just feeling overwhelmed right now?
I would say your feelings are valued and valid and heard by OSSTF. The provincial executive and myself, we have done a number of site visits, and every classroom that we walk into, every staff room that we walk into, de-streamed class sizes are the number one issue that we're hearing from members, and how it is not sustainable going forward. Teachers are feeling certainly overwhelmed that they're having to, again, carry the burden of an underfunded system and trying to make it work, knowing that they're not able and always able to give every individual student the attention that they deserve. So, as we said, equity work, it must be collective, it must be resourced, and it must be supported. And to members that are listening, know that OSSTF is going to do everything that we can to make sure that this government puts the investments into the classrooms so you can do your jobs, and let's make sure that every student has a chance at success.
So when we're talking about additional resources and supports in classrooms, what do you think that looks like?
One thing specifically that I can talk about is, I would say, more educational support staff and more access to educational support staff. not only for teachers, but for students as well, to give students that additional support that they may need in their classrooms. Right now, we have a severe shortage of educational support staff. I think the government has a major retention issue that they're going to need to deal with to be able to attract educational support staff to the profession. When boards are looking at deficits and having to cut corners, oftentimes that is at the expense of the jobs of educational support staff. So if this government is serious about putting the investments and putting the resources back into those classrooms, they also have to take a look at how educational support staff factor into those additional resources.
In OSSTF FASO, we have a variety of job classes. And so what would you say to those of our members who aren't, effectively directed by de-streaming?
I would say that even if one issue doesn't impact you personally, it impacts somebody who works beside you. And so in OSSTF, we believe in the power of collective action, collective solidarity, and supporting one another. So if there's an issue that might not directly impact you in your job class, it does, like I said, it could impact the teacher or the secretary or the custodian. We are all in this together, and that is the power of coming together as OSSTF FASO members, as a union, and making sure that every single one of us gets the supports that we need to be able to do our jobs, and at the end of the day, to be able to support students and to support publicly funded education.
So what really gives you hope as this work continues?
I would say, as the president of OSSTF FASO, what gives me hope is our members. Our members continue to show up every single day doing the impossible, and they believe absolutely that students can succeed despite the challenges, despite the underfunding of the publicly funded education system. Educators continue to advocate for their students and continue to advocate for a better system here in Ontario.
Absolutely. That's great. Thanks so much for being here with me today, Martha.
You're welcome.
And thank you so much to all of you for being here with us today. If you can, please share your stories and tag us on OSSTF social media. And you can also reach out with any questions or stories that you might have to podcast@ossstf.ca.